This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Welcome to the Water Policy and Legislation Committee and special meeting of the West Basin Municipal Water District Board of Directors for April 20, 2021. It is now 1 o'clock. I'll call the committee meeting to order. We do have a quorum, and the next item will be public comment. Mr. Shields, do we have anyone from the public who wish to speak?
Yes, I do have a request from Craig Cadwallader from the Surfrider South Bay Foundation. Craig?
Yes, and thank you, Patrick and Director Gray. I wanted to speak in support of agenda item 5A, which you will hear shortly. That is a very important project that a large number of NGOs are fully in support of, and you can see some of them on a coalition website at wetlandsrestoration.org. And there's some 20 major organizations that have signed on in support. So we're really would encourage the board to support the letter that was included as an attachment to the agenda item and support this project. It's very important going forward. Restores a degrading environmental area that's very special to Los Angeles, provides opportunities for different groups to educate themselves and get outside and enjoy nature. And I do water sampling there in the right adjacent to it in the freshwater marsh, and I can tell you that the water that goes in there has a higher bacterial level than the water that goes out. So it shows that natural forces can help clean the environment. And I think this restoration will help with that as well as provide a benefit to the public. So I hope the board will support this effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig. I'm not aware of any other requests to speak at this time, Madam Chair.
All right, is there anyone else from the public who wish to speak? Please speak up now. Okay, thank you, Mr. Shields. I don't hear anyone, so we will go to presentations.
Yes, we have no presentations today, Madam Chair.
In our next action calendar, and before that, I want to thank Mr. Craig Cadwallader for his comments this morning. And we will now go to the action calendar, item 5A. Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Chairwoman Gray, members of the committee and board, and members of the public and staff. Good afternoon to everybody. Yes, we do have 3 action items on the calendar today. The first one it pertains to the Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve Project. And so the California Department of Fish and Wildlife has prepared and certified an EIR, an environmental impact report for the Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve Project, which is intended to enhance and establish native coastal wetlands and upland habitat in Marina del Rey, south of Marina del Rey and east of Playa del Rey on about 566 acres. And so we have this on here as an item for discussion, potential action with our manager of water policy and resources, Mr. E.J. Caldwell, is going to present this matter for the committee and public to hear. E.J.?
Yes, thank you very much, Patrick. Madam Chair, members of the committee and board. The item today is related to the Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve Project. And as Patrick has just mentioned, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife has prepared and certified the environmental impact report for the Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve Project. As noted in paragraph 3 of the background, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, now that they've certified the EIR, will begin working with the Los Angeles County Flood Control District to secure a permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and completing a federal environmental review document, a process expected to take approximately 2.5 years. Now, as staff has reviewed the project and the associated websites that provide a great deal of information about the project, as well as West Basin's involvement in the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission, where we've had a chance to learn quite a bit about this program and project, staff did want to invite some of the active participants on the project to maybe provide a little bit more detail and answer any specific questions, as they themselves are the experts. So we've asked that Mr. Scott Culbertson, the Executive Director of Friends of Biona, to join us, and I see him here today, as well as potentially two additional assistants, Mr. or Mrs. Nisa Frechette, the Manager of Scientific Programs, as well as Mr. Richard Brody, the Land Manager for the Biona Wetlands. So if you don't mind, I'd like to just quickly introduce Scott, and he can walk us through a little bit more of this project as well as his team.
Terrific. Thank you, EJ and commissioners. We appreciate the opportunity to be here this afternoon. As EJ says, I'm Scott Culbertson, Executive Director of Friends of Biona Wetlands, and thank you again. Friends of Biona Wetlands support this project along with other leading environmental organizations, including Heal the Bay, Los Angeles Waterkeeper, Surfrider Foundation, thank you, Craig, Trust for Public Land, Audubon, California, and others. The project will restore critical habitat for wildlife, improve coastal resiliency, and provide exceptional public access to this natural space for all Angelenos. The project is important for Los Angeles, and it's long overdue. I'd like to introduce Nessa Frechette, who is our Manager of Scientific Programs at Biona Wetlands Restoration, Friends of Biona Wetlands, and she will give the presentation. I was made aware that Nessa might not be able to share her screen, so if you'll notice in chat, I put a link to the infographic that Nessa will be speaking to. I'd also like to introduce Richard Brody, who goes by Brody, and he's the Land Manager for the Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve for California Department of Fish and Wildlife. After Nessa's presentation, Brody will respond to the questions. Again, we thank you for this opportunity to present the facts on this important project and hope that the board will sign a letter of support. Thank you, and Nessa, take it away.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you everyone for this opportunity to speak on the Biona Wetlands Restoration Project. This project has undergone more than a decade of scientific planning, study, and environmental review with a goal of improving biodiversity and wetland function inside the Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve. This project has the support of numerous environmental leaders, as Scott was listing, including LMU Center for Urban Resilience, LA Waterkeeper, Surfrider, and the Los Angeles League of Conservation Voters, as well as California Audubon. The project also has the support of leading scientists, including Glenn McDonald, Richard Ambrose, Shelley Luce, Eric Strauss, Eric Stein, and more. The project also has the support of the most likely descendant of the Gabrielino Tongva tribe, Robert Dorme. This project is critical to the region and Los Angeles for numerous reasons. Los Angeles has lost more than 95% of its coastal wetlands. The Biona Wetlands once spanned more than 2,000 acres, and much less than the remaining 577 acres are still wetland. Marina del Rey was carved out of 900 acres of Biona, and the dredged fill was dumped on the remaining wetlands. Biona's conditions and functions are degraded and continuing to decline. Over the last century and a half, Biona underwent farming, development, drilling, dredging, channelization, filling, draining, and more. Years of scientific study has shown us that altered hydrology and topography within the reserve has led to an invasion of non-native weeds and a loss of native habitat, including deterioration of the remaining wetlands. As the only coastal wetland left in the city of Los Angeles, and one of the few remaining in the Santa Monica Bay area, this opportunity is vital to the region. The restoration project will create or enhance 201 acres of wetland habitat, restore biodiversity, improve habitats for wildlife, including endangered and other special status species. This project is a chance to create habitat for wildlife that's on the brink of extinction, including those endemic to the area and dependent on rare habitats like wetlands, riparian woodland, and coastal dunes. Wetlands need water, but much of Biona is cut off from Biona Creek. Non-native weeds have spread through the ecological reserve at great speed, creating large monocultures in many areas of the reserve. As of 2013, more than 70% of Biona was overwhelmed by non-native plants, which displace native habitats and reduce or eliminate resources for wildlife. The restoration project will recreate and protect native habitats, including salt and brackish marsh, riparian woodland, coastal sage scrub, dunes, and more. Protecting or reconnecting the Biona estuary to its floodplain is particularly vital for wetland-dependent species like the Belding savanna sparrow, which rely on the pickleweed salt marsh for their existence, which in turn rely on tidal flow. The selected project will allow Biona to adapt to sea level rise, which is critical. As the ocean rises, marsh habitat will be able to transition to higher elevations. This will provide habitat for the Belding savanna sparrow and other wetland-dependent species into the future. If Biona cannot adapt to sea level rise, their habitat will be lost. Under current conditions, the self-regulating tide gates that allow some tidal flow currently will permanently shut when sea level rise reaches 2.1 feet, approximately around 2050. CDFW and the Army Corps of Engineers are collaborating to design earthen levees around the perimeter of the reserve that will maintain or increase flood capacity to protect surrounding communities. This project includes the abandonment of all 16 wells from inside the reserve currently run by the SoCalGas, including removal of all related roads and infrastructure, which planners fought hard to achieve. This is a huge win for Biona, since SoCalGas owns the mineral rights underneath the wetlands and doesn't have to leave if they don't want to. Their decision allows CDFW to maximize wetland habitat acreage and connectivity in the restoration plan. The Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve is currently closed to the public, but could potentially be a gem of a park with exceptional wildlife viewing and recreational and educational opportunities for communities that have very little access to the outdoors. Currently, Biona has less than 2 miles of bike paths and 1 mile of pedestrian trail. This alternative adds 3.6 miles of pedestrian and bike paths, 5.5 miles of pedestrian-only trails, and 2,000 feet of boardwalk to give close views of the wetlands. These amenities will make the reserve wheelchair accessible for the first time and provide parking for visitors who live outside the immediate area, as well as bus parking for schools, which is critical. A restored Biona will provide access as well as critical open space to more than 15,000 disadvantaged households within biking distance and hundreds of thousands disadvantaged households in driving distance. This project will help meet our state's goal to protect 30% of wetlands and coastal waters by 2030. The Southern California Wetlands Recovery Project Regional Strategy Report from 2018 identifies the Santa Monica subregion as having the lowest opportunity for preserving wetlands in the face of climate change and sea level rise due to habitat loss and surrounding urbanization. As the second largest open space in Los Angeles after Griffith Park, Biona is our only opportunity to restore a fully functioning, biologically diverse estuary in an otherwise highly urbanized environment. Biona may be highly degraded, but it has the potential to be a thriving coastal wetland. After years of study, community meetings, public comment, and science advisory panel collaboration, the state is ready to move forward with the plan to restore Biona. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Biona Wetlands restoration, and we hope the board will adopt a position in support of the project. We're happy to answer any of your questions.
And Madam Chair, as mentioned prior to the presentation just now, Richard Brody, the land manager from Biona Wetlands, is here and available to answer any questions. And I might add, Because this presentation and the overview of this item is slightly different than our normal process where staff would be providing the programmatic update, I have noticed that there are a few members of the general public that may or may not want to add public comment. I know we had public comment at the very beginning, but at the chair's discretion, I don't know if there's anybody that has joined since the start of this meeting that may have a comment specific to this program. I did see Mr. Jim Kennedy has joined us. And as noted in the board memo, he was one of the people that provided the district with some of the information related to the project and did highlight some of the supporters and the request, or introduce a request for West Basin to consider adopting a position on the bill, or excuse me, on the project.
I have a question, if I might ask. This is Director Deere. Can you hear me?
You're on, Director Deere.
Yes, I want to know how what's the time frame on this project? When is it supposed to be completed?
Who can answer that? Is that EJ or is that Scott or?
I would defer that to Mr. Brody.
Mr. Brody?
Hi, Director Deere. Thank you for that question. The Department of Fish and Wildlife thanks you guys for the time to do this presentation today. This is the department's project, and we've been working hard on it for many years, and I just really appreciate the Friends of Biona's advocacy and helping arrange some of these talks. The timeline on the project, now that we've certified, is to now go through the process of permitting with the Army Corps, the county, and the Coastal Commission, possibly the Regional Water Quality Control Board. So we're only at 30% design. Now we need to engage with stakeholders again and work on final designs. We actually get to 60% and work on final designs. But like they said earlier in the presentation, we expected this to be a 2.5 year process from the time we re-engage with the Corps and get that going. Was your question more about when would the project be completed or groundbreaking?
Yes, completed.
Well, there is a schedule in the EIR. If you'd like, I can give you that specific table number. But the first couple years would be dedicated just to earth moving. We've got upwards of 3 million cubic yards of fill. And if you can imagine, that's a yard by a yard that stretches out to Mobile, Alabama. So we've got a lot of earth that was deposited on the former wetlands that we need to excavate out of the way. That could take at least a couple of years. And from there, we need to do the restoration portion. And then there's a pause between restoration to make sure habitat's taken and endangered species are repopulating the area. And then there's the long-term management, or the long-term maturation of the restoration and the monitoring requirements that go. So we could be looking at a 6 to 8 to 10 year horizon for the entire restoration, but it's an in perpetuity project. To get the ground broken, though, we could be looking at 3, 4, 5 years to get out there. I see someone waving their hand, or they're just stretching.
No,
I apologize.
Yeah, sorry I can't be more specific, but we're now working with the county and the Corps, and they'll dictate a lot of the timeline from here out. We'll just keep providing the information and working with them as close as possible.
All right, Mr.
Thank you for that answer.
Thank you, Mr. Brody. Is there anyone else? I think EJ mentioned Mr. Kennedy may be on line, just joined us. Is there anyone else that wanted to speak? Mr. Kennedy, Jim Kennedy, is that you raising your hand?
Yes, Gloria, Director Gray. I just wanted to thank again all the directors for taking up this issue. And the idea is to look at this project at this time, as Director Deere said, that this is a long-term project. There's going to be a lot of iterations, but what would be helpful is for this body to weigh in on the water issues at this time related to the project that's being proposed. So what's the interest of the West Basin would be the aquifer or water quality or issues that are germane to you to weigh in to say that this project is good or needs to consider other things, so that when we move forward, we have your scientific analysis and understanding as a part of that stakeholder engagement. And we want to make sure that people, other elected officials, understand from the water perspective why this project should move forward.
You know, thank you, Mr. Kennedy, for bringing that up, because that's part of my questions, and I have several, is West Basin's interest, because I know that Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission is part of the project, part of the process right now, and certainly Fish and Wildlife. And I'm on the board with at the commission, and I wanted to make sure that it made sense for West Basin to even consider taking any position, because we're part of the commission. So naturally we support the projects that the commission is involved in, and certainly the commission is supportive of this project. And also my question would be, what other water agencies are supportive? And so perhaps our staff can evaluate that part of your project that would be of interest to West Basin, where we could be helpful if we choose to do that. So again, the question would be, what other water agencies have kind of joined in to support your project, and what would be West Basin's specific interest if we did take a position separate from the commission? Because again, we're part of the commission, so obviously we support your project because they're part of the commission. And the other thing, I know there's opposition out there, and who are the oppositions and who are your supporters? And again, you know, what would be the benefit and how we could be helpful if we choose to do so? And so with that, we can have further discussion, but I do want to ask Mr. Shields to look into that, because this is just on a committee. It's a committee item, and it's for us to consider to take a position. So we'll have to go to the board for the board to make a final decision on whether or not we will, or what the position would be. But I think that will be helpful in terms of knowing who your supporters are from other water agencies and who your opponents are. You may already have that listed. I don't know. I know it was mentioned, and certainly the benefit, the part of your project that would, you know, would be an area that West Basin would be interested in, and how we could be helpful in those areas. So, Mr. Shields, perhaps you can have that information if the board, when the board looks at this issue as a whole.
Yes, Chairwoman Gray, I will follow up on the level of interest and benefit for West Basin, and look more closely at the Santa Monica Bay Restoration being part of the process, and what that entails, and what other water agencies are supporting the project, as well as its opponents. We'll bring that back to the board meeting.
Yeah, and Mr. Kennedy or Mr. Brody, and how would our support or whatever be helpful, in the sense that we're already part of the Santa Monica Bay Restoration? Why our single support would be something that would be helpful in terms of moving the project forward, what that means.
Well, one example is there's a coalition that came together to support the project, the Wetlands Restoration Coalition, that I think Scott mentioned earlier. A multitude of highly respected large environmental organizations, but individually they wrote letters too, speaking for themselves and about issues that directly related to them, or concerns that maybe the coalition didn't address. So each individual group support is much appreciated.
Okay, all right, that sounds. Go on.
I just wanted to let your staff know that the Water Replenishment District is in parallel with you, also looking similarly at these questions. And right. Overall, what these water districts that this territory includes, it would be Water Replenishment District and West Basin, is their expertise in water quality and their ability to say whether or not this project would affect water quality in good or bad ways. So we want science to lead in this decision-making process, and your input in that direction would help us determine whether or not things are done right.
Great. So water quality is an area certainly we're interested in. All right, well, I'm sure we'll have all that information when the board considers any position or any consideration of a position. Are there any other comments from Mr. Kennedy or Mr. Brody or anyone?
I have a comment. Don
Yes,
Deere.
Director Deere, please.
Yeah, would it be out of order for this committee to recommend to the board that we support the project? I'd like to do that.
I think that what's on the agenda is for the board to consider a position. So if you're supportive of moving it forward for the board to consider a position, because the full board will have to make a decision on what that position will be.
Right, so I would like to recommend to the board a support position.
Okay, well, my recommendation would be for the board to consider a position. I think we need to come back with more information to find out what part of the project is beneficial to West Basin, so that if we do take a support position, we can identify why we're taking that position, because it entails water quality, which is an issue, something that we would be interested in. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Brody?
Yes.
Perfect sense. Yeah, that makes sense. We appreciate the time you're putting into it. What I didn't mention earlier was that aside from the department being appreciative of your time today, I was joined by our environmental programs manager from San Diego headquarters, Rich Berg, and our land supervisor from the region, Tim Dillingham. So you've got the three of us here, and if you have any other follow-up questions, we're happy to address them after this.
Okay, well, thank you. And if staff, Mr. Chills and Mr. Caldwell, maybe they can get with your staff and answer whatever questions that would be helpful when the full board takes up this item.
Happy to do it.
Yep.
Director Deere?
Yeah, the question of who's opposing the project wasn't answered. Is there any opposition organized against it?
Mr. Kennedy or Mr. Brody?
Well, there are groups opposed to the restoration. The specific list of them, I don't have available to me. There are a couple of lawsuits pending right now, which I can't speak directly to, but all that's available on the web. You can Google Biona Wetlands and you'll see who supports the project and some people speaking out against it and what their platforms are. But I can tell you the largest science-based nonprofit organizations in the region are supporting the project.
Right. And I think that's why the information that I requested to be provided to the full board will include that information, those who support and those who oppose, Director Deere. So the board will have that information.
Good, thank you very much.
All right. All right, any further questions of any board members?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, Director Williams, President Williams.
Thank you. I just have one question concerning the removal of the unsuitable soil in the wetlands. And you indicated that that's a lot of soil. And I just wonder, where is that going to go?
So I know some people have referred to it as soil. I'd say there's probably some soil development on the surface. Most of it was marine sediments deposited when we built the Marina del Rey, and we're going to use the bulk of it, as much as possible, will be balanced on site. So the bulk of it will be to move the existing levees from the center of the reserve to the perimeter of the reserve. It is an ecological reserve, and moving activities to the perimeter is a goal. And while protecting, maintaining or increasing the existing flood risk. So we'll use a lot of it to create earthen levees around the perimeter of the reserve, deposit some in some of the upland areas around the perimeter that will provide some upland estivation, which is good for wetland and biological interaction, genetic exchange between uplands and the wetlands. And what we can't balance on site will be trucked off to available landfills, or we do have an option that's analyzed in the EIR for offshore, clean offshore disposal at approved offshore disposal sites. We don't know if we're going to go that route or not, but these are the options on the table.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay,
And Madam Chair, I do have one quick question.
that's Director Houston.
Director Houston, I just want to thank everybody for being on the call today. It's nice to see all your faces, by the way. I want to understand, is it going to be on the board meeting this month or at a future meeting? Because I didn't hear a date on that.
Well, the committee recommendation would be to move the item to the next board meeting. So that's this month, right? In April. So it would be on the board agenda in April
Okay,
with
so it's like,
recommendation to consider taking a position.
perfect. So that's like a week and a half, I believe. Okay.
Yeah, that's the order of business that we always follow.
Well, I understand. I just didn't hear a specific. So thank you.
Yeah.
Is that correct, Mr. General Manager? Is that the order of business we follow?
Yeah, that's normally what we follow. And the next board meeting is on Monday, the 26th of April
Right.
at 1 p.m.
Okay. All right, thank you
Very
for the question. Okay. Any further
You're welcome.
discussion on this item? Okay, then we will, thank you very much for the presentations today, all of you. And good to see all of you.
Yeah, and thank you for giving the Department of Fish and Wildlife so much of your time.
No problem. Thank you for being here, everyone. All right, we will go to the next item. Mr. General Manager, the next item, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman Gray. Our second action item today involves a bill sponsored by our good friend, of Recycled Water, Congresswoman Grace Napolitano, HR 1015, and it's known as the Water Recycling Investment and Improvement Act. And this bill or this legislation would assist agencies, water agencies, with the expansion and planning, design, and construction of water recycling plants, and would support the continued modernization of infrastructure in California and other Western states. So in this particular one, we are in fact asking that the board take consider adopting a support position. And I think we have our water policy and resource analyst, Matthew Vey. There you are, Matthew. Matthew will cover this topic for us.
All right, thank you, Patrick, for the good introduction, and good afternoon, Chairwoman Gray and members of the committee and board. As Patrick mentioned, the item before you is to recommend a support position on HR 1015 by Congresswoman Napolitano. This bill was introduced by Congresswoman Napolitano on February 11th of this year. As Patrick mentioned, it's the title of the bill is the Water Recycling Investment and Improvement Act. I think as many or most of us know, Representative Napolitano has been a longtime steward, advocate, supporter of making federal investments in local resources, local water resources project, including projects such as recycled water, conservation, groundwater, desalination, and environmental sustainability. So really this bill kind of serves as a continuing legacy of hers in supporting these types of programs. You may recall that this was a reintroduction of legislation very similar to previous legislative proposals made by Representative Napolitano. In 2018, there was HR 5127, which ended up not passing Congress during the 115th session. And there was also in the next year, 2019, HR 1162, which did have a little more movement. It passed House Natural Resources last year. It ended up being included in the Moving Forward Act, which was HR 2, which passed the full House. But unfortunately, at that time, it did not move any further. And so it did not make it out of the 116th congressional session. Just to note, the West Basin Board did take support positions on both of those previous bills in prior years. And as introduced this time around, HR 1015 would do the following things. So as Patrick mentioned, it would really assist water agencies with some of the planning, designing, expanding, and building of recycled water facilities. It would do so by increasing the Title 16 authorization under the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act. So that's the WIN Act. And it would come through competitive grant funding. It would expand that from $50 million to an authorization of $500 million, so a 10-fold increase. It would also make the Title 16 program more of a permanent program. Currently, that program is expected to sunset this year in 2021. It would actually push that out to fiscal year 2025. It would also increase individual project funding limits from $20 to $30 million. Currently, there's a ceiling of $20 million per project. So for those projects that might exceed, say, $100 million or more, it would potentially give those water agencies an additional $10 million of federal funds that they could leverage for those types of projects. It also removes a couple of requirements that currently exist. One is that projects be located in either a drought or disaster area. And the second would be that a project must be designated in appropriations bills or legislation. So those requirements would be removed. The bill is currently referred to the House Committee on Natural Resources. At this time, no hearing date has been set. With that said, there's been numerous co-sponsors on the bill, most of them coming from the state of California. However, there were some other supporters, co-sponsors from other states. And I would note that our very own Representative Barragan from Carson is one of the co-sponsors on the bill. So just to summarize, HR 1015 could provide West Basin with new opportunities in the future for federal funding of its recycled water program through the Title 16 competitive grants process. And for all these reasons, staff is recommending that the board adopt a support position on HR 1015 by Congresswoman Napolitano. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, I recommend we move the recommendation forward.
I agree.
All right, thank you. So we will move the recommendation forward. We will go to item, let's see, 5C, please. Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Chairwoman Gray. Yeah, the third item on the action calendar today involves a letter of intent with the Metropolitan Water District related to their proposed project over in Carson, the advanced water treatment plant that would produce essentially drinking water from at the LA Sanitation District site at the joint plant. And we have been in some discussions with Metropolitan and what their plans are. Of course, it's a bit of a ways off. It's currently a demonstration plant, but I think it behooves us to certainly collaborate with them and discuss where we may take advantage of any synergies, and we can coordinate our respective projects. So this is a non-binding agreement, but it is there's been LOIs that Metropolitan has gotten with others, including DWP and separately with Long Beach and Torrance and WRD. So and EJ has been finalizing the discussions with them to get us to this LOI. So EJ, do you want to fill in the rest of the details, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Patrick. Madam Chair, members of the committee and board. As you recall, back in November of 2015, Metropolitan Water District authorized an agreement with the sanitation districts of Los Angeles County to pursue a potential large-scale water recycling facility. That project was completed in October of 2019 and currently has a capacity of 500,000 gallons per day. The concept there is similar to what West Basin has done with our desalination demonstration facility, is to really analyze the process and look at a potential full-scale facility. The goal of this program would produce up to 150 million gallons per day of purified water for reuse applications, including direct and indirect potable reuse. As part of the many project presentations that Metropolitan Water District staff has provided the Metropolitan Water District Board of Directors, the directors did authorize Metropolitan Water District staff to begin working with its member agencies to identify opportunities for collaboration and ultimately enter into a letter of intent, as Patrick just mentioned. The concept behind an LOI is to kind of outline opportunities for collaboration and potential need for advanced treated recycled water, and ultimately enter into an MOU in the future that would outline the potential for an agreement. So what you have before you is a negotiated letter of intent by West Basin Municipal Water District staff as well as Metropolitan Water District staff. As Patrick mentioned, the LOI is non-binding and has been reviewed by West Basin Legal Counsel. The concept behind West Basin's LOI, and it should be pointed out that each member agency in entering into a letter of intent will be slightly different than the others. We all have different needs. We all have different unique aspects of the needs for our service area. So you'll note that in West Basin's LOI, the intent is to ensure maximum coordination by and between Metropolitan Water District and West Basin, and to remain engaged in the development of additional advanced water treatment water in the region. And therefore, staff recommends that the board authorize the general manager to execute a non-binding LOI to collaborate on the development of a future memorandum of understanding related to the production, distribution, and delivery of ATW water within the Los Angeles region. And if I could direct you to packet page 15, that does include the draft letter of intent that West Basin staff has negotiated with Metropolitan Water District. I think in looking at the agreement, you do have some recitals that kind of walk you through the process, but I wanted to highlight on packet page 16, you can see the intent and components included in the LOI. It does share there that the parties intend to collaborate in the development and utilization of AWT supplies produced from their respective facilities. And this was a key aspect for West Basin Municipal Water District because we wanted to minimize areas of potential conflict or duplication of activities. Obviously, West Basin Municipal Water District is the leading producer of advanced water treated recycled water within the region. We have been highly supportive of Metropolitan Water District's efforts. We've actually collaborated throughout this process, but we want to make sure that whenever there's an opportunity to collaborate, we do so. And whenever there's an opportunity to minimize areas of potential duplication of activities, that we also do that. You can see that 1B highlights that we intend to develop a plan to coordinate the potential integration of Metropolitan's, West Basin's, and other advanced water treatment water recycling programs within the region. So really trying to maximize the use of advanced treated recycled water in our region and make sure that there's enough water that Metropolitan Water District produces for other portions of the service area. If you turn to packet page 17, you can see there that 1C highlights the party's intent to develop a memorandum of understanding that will include conducting and preparing any additional studies necessary to evaluate the potential introduction of advanced water treated water in the West Coast Basin. So that ultimately is our goal as Metropolitan Water District continues to proceed with the development of their program, that we identify those opportunities, and ultimately when we engage in the next level of an agreement, the MOU, that we're able to outline that. So Madam Chair, I will repeat staff's recommendation. The staff recommendation here is that the board authorize the general manager to execute a non-binding LOI to collaborate on the development of a future memorandum of understanding related to the production, distribution, and delivery of advanced treated water within the Los Angeles region. And it would be, and you see it noted there as Exhibit A, the draft LOI that I just walked through. That would be the LOI that would be entered into by the general manager. So Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, as well as any questions of the committee and board.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Are there any questions of the board?
Madam Chair.
Yes, President Williams.
Yes, I have a question. Thank you. This is concerning packet, page 16. EJ, one of the things that kind of made me a little nervous about this big project at the onset was that the quantity of water that's going to be produced compared to what we do. What's going to happen to ensure us that we don't get moved out based on what you say the order of magnitude of so how are we going to protect ourselves against that, or can we?
That was primarily the discussion that West Basin had with Metropolitan Water District staff, is to really ensure that the infrastructure that's been paid for in part by Metropolitan Water District through the Local Resources Program, the LRP, as well as West Basin and the our retailers, that we don't strand any assets, that we maximize the use of recycled water in our service area. And you can see that West Basin has an extensive footprint as far as delivering recycled water to the area. And when possible and when needed, we could augment that with Metropolitan Water District water. But we would note that there's plenty need for additional water supply. We know that. We do know that the potential for direct potable reuse, which would be raw water augmentation, is a very real possibility in the coming years. Through legislation, the state board is required to adopt recycled water standards for DPR, which would be that raw water augmentation. And we do anticipate that at some point that would be a real viable option, but only if you own and operate a drinking water facility. You need to supplement that recycled water into the raw water and then put it through your drinking water facility. So Metropolitan Water District obviously has a great opportunity to do that once they can deliver that recycled water in front of their drinking water facility. For West Basin, we primarily provide water for indirect potable reuse. We inject that water into the ground and it ultimately becomes groundwater augmentation, which is another viable option for recycled water. So again, we hope to introduce all options with Metropolitan Water District. And I think if you read through the draft LOI, that was West Basin staff's primary objective, was to identify what we do and what they do. And as I pointed out there in 1A, to really minimize the areas of potential conflict and duplication of activities.
Yeah. Chairwoman Gray, if I may add to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great question, President Williams. So that's kind of precisely the reason for this letter of intent, which would ultimately lead to a memorandum of understanding to not be territorial in any way, but to make sure that we have regional cooperation, because there's things that the project that Metropolitan is considering are much bigger than us, going all the way down to Orange County with this water. So, but as far as where we would have common areas of interest, we would absolutely, as EJ clearly mentioned there, we want to protect our interests and make sure there's no stranded assets, and that it makes sense generally for the region who should do what project. And sometimes it could be a joint project. So that's what we would work through with them. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? Or any further questions? All right, Director Deere, I recommend moving forward the recommendation, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
All right, we will move forward with the recommendation for support for this this item. All right, we will go to item 6, information calendar. Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Chairwoman Gray. Yeah, we do move to our information calendar now, where we have our typical 2 main topics here. The Metropolitan Water District report, and we have our water policy and resource analyst 2, Tammy Hirlahai. Tammy is here to cover this item for us. Tammy?
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Gray, members of the committee and the board, directors. This memo includes a summary of Metropolitan Water District activities And I will provide updates on a couple of programs that are relevant and of interest to West Basin, and then wrap up with a brief summary on the water supply conditions. So this information starts on page 28 of the committee packet. So starting with the update on the integrated resources plan, Metropolitan has continued to refine water demand assumptions and analysis through modeling and historical data to identify a range of water supply and demand. So as I reported last February, Metropolitan has developed 4 probable scenarios to depict underlying assumptions, which can be utilized to address future impacts. And these underlying assumptions of various factors include climate change, economic conditions, demographics, and regulations, all of which will impact the future supplies and demands. So for each scenario, they can provide an example of what water reliability conditions might look like in the future and what the probability would be of a shortage that might occur under various factors. So last month, Metropolitan hosted an online workshop during their IRP committee on the factors related to water demands. They held a 3-hour meeting with a 5-member panel of experts on water demands to discuss issues in this area by providing technical information to help inform considerations of key drivers affecting future water reliability. The panel provided their input on demand assumptions and plausible ranges of future outcomes. The next workshop this month on April 27th will include another panel of experts, specifically climate experts, to provide their input on vulnerabilities and opportunities in water resources. These 2 expert panels will help Metropolitan to refine their analysis as they continue developing the 2020 IRP. So moving on to employee-related concerns. For Metropolitan's response to employee-related concerns, during the past several months, Metropolitan has been addressing issues related to alleged harassment and equal opportunity employment opportunity claims. The Metropolitan Board took a proactive approach to address these items last November. Their board unanimously approved for the ethics officer to enter into a contract to conduct an independent review of the allegations and related concerns. So as a result, the ethics officer entered into an agreement with the Shaw Law Group to carry out these duties. Since then, the Shaw Law Group has assessed several areas of concern, and their work has included interviews, examining numerous documents, and they issued a climate assessment survey to all of their 1,854 employees. In addition to this activity, the law firm received requests for personal interviews from more employees. So as a result, additional time and further investigation is required. So because of this, the board authorized an increase to amend the contract with Shaw Law Group for an amount not to exceed $400,000 last month in March. So during the course of several committee and board meetings, Chairwoman Gray has reaffirmed Metropolitan Board commitment to safeguarding their agency's work environment by establishing a process to take necessary steps in addressing specific issues to ensure a fair, equitable, and productive workplace. And recently, Chairwoman Gray has sent a letter to the Metropolitan Legislative Delegation and the Joint Legislative Audit Committee outlining their board and management action that address these employee concerns. Chairwoman Gray has pledged Metropolitan full cooperation and support should an audit be deemed necessary. So more information on this topic is included as Attachment A. And additionally, Metropolitan has a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council, which meets on a monthly basis. So this council is comprised of leadership from the Employee Resource Group and the Employee Bargaining Unit. And the purpose is to promote and enhance diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the organization. And finally, to help ensure greater transparency and accountability, a microsite has been created on their website titled Metropolitan's Response to Employee Concerns. And this includes information about board action, policies, correspondence, and other related matters. So I wanted to provide a brief update on this. This was brought up at the last month committee. And before I move on to the next item, I wanted to also pause and see if there are any questions so far. So hearing none, I will go ahead and move on. Next item is recruitment process for the general manager. And last month, the general manager, Jeff Keitlinger, had announced his plan to retire. The board selected the Hawken Company in August to assist in a national recruitment search. Then in November, open forums were held in an effort to seek input from members of the public and member agencies related to the qualifications and experience that would be desired for the selected candidate in order to successfully lead the agency. The Hawken Company compiled feedback and input to help guide their recruitment strategy. And the Hawken Company is reviewing applications submitted and will invite selected candidates to participate in an interview process. So I wanted to provide this update to you, and that their executive committee has started this month to screen candidates for this position. Moving on to board meeting action. Included in this report for reference is information related to the board actions for the month of March under attachment B. And additionally, a list of items taken to the board this month in April is included under attachment C. And moving on to the water supply update. So for Northern California supplies, California is facing a critically dry year. And the water supply allocation for the state water project contractors has been lowered to 5% for the 2021 water year. This is down from their initial 10% allocation. Recent snow water equivalent surveys conducted by DWR, they have indicated conditions are continuing to impact the state's water supply. And we can see, now we're in the month of April, we can see significant decline in terms of precipitation and snowpack across the state. So for Colorado River supplies, the current reservoir elevation for Lake Mead is 1,084 feet and is 40% full. A shortage declaration would be triggered if the elevation would continue to decline below 1,070 feet. And last month, I reported a recent study conducted by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. They are projecting a possibility of Lake Mead's elevation to fall below the shortage trigger level by the end of this calendar year. And should that happen, a shortage would be declared on the Colorado River system for the lower basin states. With respect to Lake Powell, the current reservoir elevation is 3,567 feet and 37% full. The most probable elevation for Lake Powell is projected to be 31% full by the end of calendar year 2021. And so included for more reference in this report, if we're looking at right now, is on attachment D for the graphics. And finally, Metropolitan Board Chairwoman Gray has prepared a statement that is on their website, thanking Southern California residents and businesses for conservation efforts. Extraordinary effort during the last drought in 2015, which has helped Metropolitan to store water supplies in their system. The Metropolitan has also put out a press release, which is included in attachment E in your packet, stating that their preparedness with water supplies, they're well prepared right now as we enter this critically dry year. So that concludes this report, and I would be happy to address any questions.
Thank you so much, Tammy, for that very comprehensive report. Are there any questions, board members? All right, I just wanted to, you gave a very comprehensive report. I just want to reiterate a couple of points I wanted to make. The GM recruitment process is on schedule. I think the schedule was published publicly, so you should have seen the schedule. And so we do anticipate the process moving forward and to be on schedule. And I think the schedule reflects the end of the process, probably May, June. I believe that's what it reflects. I just want to reiterate that in terms of recruitment for a new general manager for Metropolitan Water District. The independent review of the policies, well, the issues, the EEO issues. Tammy gave a very comprehensive report about the Charlotte group. They do anticipate needing more time, and I think they had projected that their report would be presented to the board the end of this month, but they need more time because there's more interest, and I think they indicated they need a couple of more months, so that would be June, July, I think July. So I do want to say that, but it's moving along thoroughly. The good news is that there are quite a few employees who are interested in providing input to the process. And so I believe that is the reason why they need more time. So is there any questions of me as chair of Met Board or representing you on Metropolitan Board, or of Director Williams who represent you? Any questions from board members? Okay, Director Williams, President Williams, did you want to add anything?
Chair, I would just like to make this comment that there's some rumblings that there's not enough information coming out, but there's an opportunity to ask questions now. There's an opportunity once a month at our caucus meeting to ask those pressing or questions about Met, and we don't hear anything. So I was always told that silence is consent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Williams. Okay, we will go to the next item, item 6B, Mr. Shills.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, great report, Tammy, very comprehensive. So now we move to item 6B, or last item on the information calendar. And this is for, of course, we will go over the state and federal legislative updates to be given here by our Manager of Water Policy and Resources, Mr. E.J. Caldwell. E.J.?
Yes, thank you very much, Patrick. Madam Chair, members of the committee and board, you do have your state and federal updates. They're included on packet page 47, but I will begin my comments on packet page 49 that includes the Niemela and Pappas and Associates written update. And as noted therein, spring recess has now come to its conclusion. It did recess on April 5th, and almost immediately the California State Legislature began their policy committee hearings. As noted there, due to social distancing requirements and trying to maintain safety and protect all the members of the California State Legislature, they have reduced the number of committee hearings, and public access, while available virtually, is not the same as it would be in a typical year, but it seems like it's running a little bit smoother than in years past, or smoother than last year, as things were fairly new when it came to the COVID safety precautions. You can see that the drought announcements are garnering a great deal of attention. The Department of Water Resources did announce that its snowpack measurement was only 59%, or was 59% below average. Regulators are gearing up to take action on the critical dry conditions. And you saw this obviously in our most recent drought, where the State Water Resources Control Board began to implement demand management measures specifically related to prohibitions of water waste. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. You can see that the chair of the Senate and Assembly Agriculture Committee has requested that the governor announce a statewide emergency declaration on California's drought. This is something that carries a great deal of weight with it. Upon the declaration of an emergency, obviously, certain state agencies do have additional authorities. At this time, the governor has been reluctant to declare an emergency. However, we're going to continue to track that because that could drastically impact kind of the actions that are taken by Metropolitan Water District, as well as West Basin and our retailers as far as responding to that declaration. As part of the drought announcement, you can see there below that the Senate Pro Tem, Tony Atkins, has publicly stated that in order to get ahead of the pending drought, the legislature would should capitalize on the state's unexpected fiscal surpluses by spending $2 billion on strategic, non-controversial water projects. And I want to highlight that because when we talk about water supply programs and projects throughout our state, the term non-controversial can sometimes be a term of art. You know, as with any infrastructure program or project, you could have support, you could have opposition. And so I think you're starting to see a lot of the stakeholder organizations, including the Association of California Water Agencies, Water Reuse California, and of course CalDesal, really working with the Senate Pro Tem's office to identify kind of how they draw that line as far as non-controversial, or where to and how to walk that descriptor back. It's worth noting that whenever you talk about surface storage, which is considered to be one of the best investments Southern California has made with the creation and usage of Diamond Valley Lake, that of course was highly controversial in certain communities. All of the surface water storage programs and projects that have been promoted over the last several years, including those that have been funded through past water bonds, additionally provide support and opposition. So you're really starting to see the actions of those stakeholders working with the Pro Tem as far as identifying how to utilize that potential $2 billion. And meanwhile, Assembly Bill 1500 and Senate Bill 45, those are our two climate response bonds. I'm sorry?
Yeah, are you listening to this?
Director Williams, can you mute?
Find the defendant guilty to starting to reach the display April 2021 at 1:40.
Director Williams, can you mute your phone? Thank
you. The jury, I'm not going to ask.
Go on, EJ.
Okay.
Yes or no.
You are seeing a great deal of negotiations move forward with those bonds. They were heard in committee just this week. And again, discussions are really kind of focused on where and how to use those funds in the future. So I'll highlight that in a second. But let me begin on a specific talk about legislation. You see at the very bottom of packet page 49, Assembly Bill 1195 by Assemblymember Garcia. And this was originally related to the Southern Los Angeles County Regional Water Agency. And I wanted to highlight that the bill has been drastically amended. And I'll walk you through those amendments, and I'll talk a little bit about where the bill is. As amended, the bill would include the Southern Los Angeles County Human Right to Water Collaboration Act. It would require the State Water Resources Control Board to appoint a commissioner to implement the Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience, the SAFER program in Southern Los Angeles County. And as I just mentioned, would require the appointment of a commissioner to implement the SAFER program. It would create this commissioner with the jurisdictional boundaries of the Water Replenishment District of Southern California, and in collaboration with the communities and operators of public water systems in the region. So that would include the West Basin Municipal Water District service area and the community water systems within the West Basin service area. It would also require the commissioner to honor before December 31st, 2024, develop and submit to the State Water Board a plan for the long-term support of public water systems in Southern Los Angeles County. And further, would require the commissioner to oversee the operations of the Central Basin Municipal Water District in selling drinking water and recycled water to public water systems in its jurisdiction. It would further require Central Basin to cooperate with the commissioner in exercising the commissioner's oversight responsibility. Obviously, one of the key issues here is related to community drinking water systems that are at risk or are currently failing, whether it be financial or through providing drinking water. And as part of that effort, looking to not just identify opportunities to provide assistance, but also working with the local LAFCO on potential consolidation. And one of the underlying issues here is how we would handle the community water systems that own and utilize groundwater pumping rights. When you do have potentially forced consolidation, there is this question about those rights and the communities that could potentially be affected. So this bill is scheduled right now to be heard by the Assembly Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee. It is scheduled to be heard in committee tomorrow. The bill, as of right now, only has two stakeholders that have positions on the bill. That is the Association of California Water Agencies, so ACWA. They right now have a disfavor position, which means that they oppose the bill, but they won't actively lobby on behalf or against the bill. And then, of course, Central Basin Municipal Water District does have an opposed position on the bill. It's also worth noting that the Assembly Committee has provided some additional comments on the bill, and I wanted to highlight a couple of their comments because I thought that this speaks, I think, to the stakeholder associations and the groups that are actively working on the bill. It states that Assembly Bill 1195 raises many important issues. However, there are several issues that may warrant further consideration. The author may wish to continue a dialogue with the State Water Board and Public Water Systems in Southern Los Angeles County regarding the role of commissioner. And secondly, it states that AB 1195 makes a change to water rights as it relates to public water systems. The author may wish to consider continuing to work with the stakeholders to refine this language. And I think that's a friendly suggestion that the author is pushing a bill that may have some specific issues or pieces that the committee might normally be critical. It is somewhat difficult sometimes to bottle up a bill in its first policy committee because most members of the legislature and members of specific committees want to give their colleagues the benefit of the doubt as far as working with stakeholders. So it is very, or it's foreseeable that the bill could pass out of committee. But West Basin is currently working right now with our lobbyists. I know that our general manager, Mr. Shields, has had several conversations, not only with our our lobbyists, but also staff with the Speaker's office, as well as myself. I've had conversations with the Speaker's staff and Assemblymember Garcia's office. It does look like they're potentially willing to amend the bill further. So we continue to work with them, and we're kind of working to refine our strategy on the bill as this moves forward. But I wanted to highlight that for you. I think I provided kind of the general overview of the bill, but I would ask quickly if the board has any specific questions about the bill. Hearing none, I will quickly move forward through the memo, and we'll highlight a couple of the bills. On packet page 50, you do have this Senator Dodd bill, Senate Bill 222 and Senate Bill 223. We've been talking about those bills throughout the legislative session here. It's related to water affordability assistance program, so providing those that are behind on their retail water bills, and of course those retailers themselves, access to assistance, as well as discontinuation of residential water service. Obviously, these two bills do impact the West Basin retailers in the West Basin service area, so we continue to monitor those. They have been amended, and they were heard in committee and have moved forward, so we're going to continue to track those. I wanted to highlight on packet page 51, Assembly Bill 377 by Assemblymember Rivas and Senator Hertzberg. This bill would require the California surface waters to be fishable, swimmable, and drinkable by January 1st, 2050. And that's kind of a broad-ranging state water goal. And so obviously with such a broad directive, it brings about a lot of questions. So we're going to continue to track that. And possibly bring that back for a potential recommendation. It's important to note that several stakeholders within the statewide associations and organizations have taken a pose unless amended position on those bills. So we'll continue to track those. If we could turn to packet page 54, I'll walk you through a handful of the bills that are included in our tracking sheet. You can see there about 2/3 of the way down, Assembly Bill 361 by Assemblymember Rivas. This bill is related to open meetings and local agency teleconferences and would authorize a local agency to use teleconferencing without complying with the Ralph M. Brown Act when a legislative body of a local agency holds a meeting for the purpose of declaring or ratifying a local emergency during a declared state or emergency or local emergency as defined. And I think that this is directly in response to the current situation that we're in. Obviously, the Brown Act is something that most, if not all, public agencies, work diligently to make sure that all meetings are properly noticed. But ultimately, in the midst of the pandemic, there was kind of an urgent rush to kind of move forward and try to operate in a way that complied with the intent of the Brown Act. But there were concerns, obviously, that these processes were not defined in statute. And I wanted to highlight this bill because it's kind of a competing measure with another bill, Assembly Bill 703, which is included in packet page 56. And that bill by Assemblymember Rubio, those two bills will have to be reconciled. West Basin staff is continuing to track both. It looks like one will ultimately be passed, but we'll continue to work on those as they're defined. A couple of new bills to highlight. Assembly Bill 836. This is on packet page 57. And I want to highlight this because West Basin has been engaged on these issues in the past. This bill would require that the California Building and Standards Commission would adopt mandatory building standards requiring that a newly constructed non-residential building be constructed with dual plumbing to allow the use of recycled water for all applicable non-potable water demands. And obviously, West Basin has been very active on issues like this in the past. Allowing for dual plumb buildings does provide access to the ability to utilize additional recycled water. However, a mandate does have some problems and issues that are at least worth asking some questions about. So we are working with California Water Reuse to potentially provide some amendments on those bills. If I could have you turn to packet page 60. This is Assembly Bill 1434 by Assemblymember Laura Friedman. It's related to urban water use objectives, indoor residential water use. And this is something that West Basin staff has been working with Metropolitan Water District staff on, as well as the Association of California Water Agencies. As you may or may not recall, in years past, when California was contemplating specific water use efficiency measures and standards, they did adopt a plan to reduce residential indoor water usage to 55 gallons per capita per day. And it required the State Water Resources Control Board to set targets for individual water retailers based off of that. And then in future years, it would actually ratchet that down from 55 down to 52.5, and then ultimately down to 50. And those were contents of bills that were heavily negotiated by retailers and wholesalers alike. 55 GPCD was a little bit lower than what some agencies were asking for, and that is what was negotiated. According to Assemblymember Friedman's staff, that number 55 was utilized as a placeholder for potential start of the discussion. And so despite the fact that those regulations have not yet been enacted, this bill would lower that residential, hold on one second. Yep. Lower that residential GPCD down to 48, and then ultimately down to 44, and then to 40. And I do know that the California Water Association, which utilizes, the advocacy approach of several different investor-owned utilities, including most of our retailers, are in opposition to this. And so we are working with them to kind of define where this concept will be moving forward. I do know that the Assemblywoman has agreed to work with Metropolitan Water District, and so West Basin hopes to be a significant part of those discussions. But obviously, we wanted to highlight that for you today so you can get a good look at it. And then if I could have you turn to packet page 64. This is something that we had a chance to discuss at West Basin's MWD caucus meeting, and I wanted to highlight Senate Bill 480 by Senator Stern, and it is related to Metropolitan Water Districts of Southern California rules, and specifically as it relates to inappropriate conduct. And obviously this bill would amend the MWD Act and would provide for the creation of Metropolitan Water Districts and specifies the powers and purposes of a district. This bill would specifically require that Metropolitan Water District adopt a standard for inappropriate conduct by its board of directors, as well as management, staff, and consultants. And while I think in concept nobody's concerned or objects to the bill, I think that in practice, amending the Metropolitan Water District Act to incorporate this does have some problematic aspects. And I know that Metropolitan Water District is working with the author, Senator Stern, who does represent a portion of the West Basin service area. So West Basin has engaged his staff just to see where this is going. We obviously want to assist Metropolitan Water District, who's been very open and transparent when it comes to the potential for joint legislative audit on this matter. And so we just want to make sure that all the information is passed through to the Senator's office. So with that, Madam Chair, I wanted to move to the Federal Affairs update, which begins on packet page 67.
Let me see if anyone has any questions with this state.
Yes.
Are there any questions, board members? And thank you, EJ. You're always very comprehensive and thorough in your reports. Want to go to the federal then?
Yes, and I'll be a little bit more brief on this because there's been so much work done, and I wanted to highlight some of the stuff that we've been doing. And you can see that at the very beginning of packet page 67 there, the House Appropriations Earmark update. So after a 10-year hiatus, the House of Representatives has officially lifted its moratorium on earmarks. You will all remember the years of walking the halls of the House and Senate office buildings and talking with the members of our delegation about the Harbor South Bay program and project and really asking for funding directly for that project. And over time, once the Republicans took control of the House and the Senate, there was that earmark moratorium, and it kind of stalled our progress as far as our ability to work with the individual members of Congress. But in working with our lobbyists and our coalitions, we were actually able to put together a system where these programs could still fund those projects through a competitive grant process. So it required a little bit of work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, as well as the Bureau of Reclamation, to really push forward those projects that would go through those agencies and then up into Congress. But just this year, the House has lifted that earmark moratorium and set in motion a very quick and defining policy in which each member of the House would be enabled to produce a list of community projects. That process is very much underway. You can see that there, the community project funding could potentially see $15 billion in fiscal year 2022 appropriations. And so West Basin staff, along with VSA, Van Scoyac Associates, did work with our entire delegation. You'll recall that they all signed a letter of support for the Harbor South Bay project. And so what we wanted to do is introduce our individual projects there with the individual members of Congress. And so if you turn to packet page 68, I wanted to highlight these. We have submitted 3 projects, one of which was the North Gardena Recycle Water Lateral. We did include a request for $2.7 million through the office of Congresswoman Maxine Waters. We also introduced the Mills Memorial Park Recycle Water Lateral with a request of $2.1 million, and that was introduced through Congresswoman Nanette Barragan. And then we did also introduce the Palos Verdes Recycle Water Pipeline, requesting $1.5 million, and that was done through Congressman Ted Lieu's office. And so I really want to thank their offices, their staff, for working with us as far as not just learning about the program and project and the benefits, but kind of assisting us in the application process. I wanted to also thank our president, Harold Williams, for his quick response to our requests as we were submitting these projects to the individual members. We wanted to make sure that we had a letter that kind of was utilized as a cover letter. And so he was able to submit that for all three of these projects. And I wanted to highlight that one of the great things about these three projects is that for the last several years, we've been highlighting these projects with our House delegation. They themselves have signed support letters for these projects. And so it was great to come back to them with these requests where they already had kind of that base of understanding. They understood all of the different stakeholders and really the regional benefits of the projects. So we are hopeful that we will ultimately be awarded some money. It's really worth noting that each House member is only allowed to submit potentially 10 projects. And it's really important to note that each member will not get 10 appropriations. They could get 1, 2, maybe 3. So it's really kind of a hopeful effort in working with them. But we feel that our projects are very unique, and we feel like we have a good chance of getting 1 or 2 and even possibly all 3 of these. So again, I want to thank the entire team. I know that Matthew Vey is also on the call or on this meeting. He was very vital to this effort and working with VSA. I want to thank Patrick for his quick responses when we were kind of sending him information. I want to thank our entire engineering and operations team. And of course, I want to thank the board for assisting us. And I just want to highlight that the several years that we've been talking about these projects and the Harbor South Bay project as a whole has got us to this point. So we're extremely excited that we could potentially see some funding. And I say all of that to highlight the positive side. And now I'll give you the other side of it, is that you can see below that the Senate has not yet agreed on the earmarking process. And so, of course, in order to pass these funding measures and the budget, you need both the House and the Senate, and of course the President to agree to that. You know, when they cannot agree on a budget, what you typically have is a no-go. There's never a vote, and then they wait to that deadline and they do what's called a continuing resolution. And you might remember those from the Obama days where they could never quite pass a budget. They were always utilizing those short-term funding mechanisms so they wouldn't shut down the government. So we're going to continue to track this, but we are very excited that the responses that we got from our members in the House, that they were very, very supportive. So I just wanted to highlight that. If you turn quickly to packet page 69, I just wanted to highlight, the handful of things that are getting done and are set in motion when we talk about funding. Obviously, you recall the COVID-19 relief package, which was signed on March 12th. The $1.9 trillion provided the state of California a lot of resources as far as assisting our retailers, assisting local government, and providing funding for local water resources. So West Basin staff is going to be really working with the State Water Resources Control Board, as well as the Department of Water Resources, and our very own Senator Stern, who is looking at potential legislation to see how these funding mechanisms can be put to use and put to use quickly in order for agencies to access those funds. So we'll continue to track that. If you turn to packet page 70, you can begin to see some of the efforts as far as, you see them on the news, but this I think provides a great breakdown of President Biden's Build Back Better infrastructure proposal. That's a $2.25 trillion package, includes $620 billion for transportation, $580 billion for improving American manufacturing, and $111 billion for water infrastructure. Now, of course, this is President Biden's proposal. It's worth noting, I think at least, that our former President Donald Trump had actively pursued a $2 to $3 trillion infrastructure package. So this is kind of in that sweet spot of 2.25. We are hopeful that something can get done. We've talked about infrastructure now for the entire 4 years of the Trump presidency, and now here we are in the first year of the Biden presidency. So we are hopeful that something will be done when it comes to infrastructure. If you look at the bottom of that page, you see the Leading Infrastructure for Tomorrow's America Act, the LIFT Act. And this would provide a great deal of funding for water-specific funding. You see PFAS Infrastructure Grant Program. There's $500 million included in there, as well as a drinking water SRF, the State Revolving Fund Reauthorization. West Basin has been very active when it comes to SRF loan funding because it provides low interest loans. And finally, you can see there the Drinking Water Systems Resilience Funding and lead service line replacement. LA County has always done really well when funding is available for those identifying older pipes where lead has been identified. And then the bill that we took action on earlier in today's committee, I just wanted to highlight that. A lot of people have asked me, what the chances of that bill passing is. And I know I had a conversation with Patrick about this earlier this month. And, typically nowadays with the way Congress works, you don't see too many individual rifle shot bills that get passed out of the House and the Senate and then get signed by the president. But you often see these concepts that are moving through their individual houses get merged into these large, what I would call package bills. And so that's one of the reasons why staff's recommendation was to support that bill. We are hopeful that Congresswoman Napolitano will be successful as far as inserting the language from her bill into one of these relief packages. And we'll continue to work with VSA as far as promoting that once we potentially get that final action by the board at the end of this month. So I just wanted to highlight that to put that in I don't know, the whole construct of these large infrastructure package bills. I thought I'd bring it back to the bill that we did take a support position on today in committee. So with that, Madam Chair, I don't believe I have any more to offer, but I am happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much, EJ, for your very comprehensive report. Are there any questions, board members?
Madam Chair, this is Don.
Yes,
we should take a position, I believe, on that very first bill that we discussed in the state legislature regarding WRD and Central Basin and so forth. So I've forgotten the number.
1195.
Yeah, I think we should take a position in opposition to it.
Okay, well, we could, what's the process, Pat? Do we put it back on the committee agenda or move it forward, or what do we do for consideration?
Yeah, the options would be, I can bring it to, even though it was not on here as an action item, it can be asked to be brought to the next board meeting for board action to take a position if that's the board's desire, and if Director Deere wanted to agendize it as such.
Yeah, please, let's do that.
All right, well, Patrick, I'd like to have information on it more to think about what it is and what it means. Because I know there are amendments that happen on it, EJ, or do you anticipate other amendments happening?
Yes, there's more coming.
Yeah, that's why I'm reluctant to take a position without all the amendments being there. So do you know when the amendments will be there?
Well, like you say, it seems like every week there's a new discussion about some new amendment, but we can bring it back to the next committee, which will give more time to just to see what the latest update is on those amendments, and then follow up on if it's the board's pleasure to take any position or not.
That'd be all right. Yeah, that'd be okay.
Okay, all right, we'll do that. Thank you so much. Okay, let's see, EJ, anything else regarding legislative update?
No, that concludes my report, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comprehensive report. Is there any closed session? Mr. Shields? Or
No,
Mr.
Madam Chair, we have no closed session today.
Right. Is Mr. O'Neill on the line?
No, he is not.
Okay. All right, future agenda items. Director's comments.
I just want to comment that it was a very efficient hour-and-a-half meeting, and staff did an excellent job as usual.
Yes.
Thank you, Don.
All right, Director Houston.
Sure, thank you. I just want to say the same thing. Thank you, staff. Really good information and presentations. And I think there was a statement made about people not asking questions. I did not happen to have any questions today, if that was referring to myself. But if I have questions, I'll be sure to ask questions. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is Director Alvarez on the phone today? Online today?
No, he was not part of the meeting today.
Okay, Director Williams, are you still online?
Yes, I'm here.
Would you like to make a comment?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. And my comments, I want to echo what our fellow directors have said. Thank you to staff. I think it was EJ and Tammy, they made reports today, if any others. And Matt, thank you, all three of you, for your comprehensive reports today. And as usual, staff is just outstanding in the work that you do and the things that you continue to do to make West Basin continue to be the world-class agency that it is. I believe that. And thank you, Patrick, as general manager, leading the team. And appreciate your work. We're still in pandemic phase, and I know it's very difficult sometimes because all of us have personal issues to deal with because of the pandemic. And so I know that your work has not suffered. I don't believe in terms of your reporting and your efficiency and the effort you put into your work. So thank you to all the staff. And please convey that message to your staff, Mr. Shields.
I will do it. Thank you very much for those kind comments. Thank you.
All right. With nothing else, then we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Bye.